I'm an anarcho-communist. There was a split between anarcho-communists and people that you would see as Marxist-Leninists and then later Stalinists. Um, I've been listening to all this stuff about Marx, and like I find it like very strange to see the conflation of Marx with like death counts and stuff like that. But what's your position on all that stuff? Because I've been seeing it all day.
What do you mean? I mean, do people attribute the works of communism to the guy who everyone credits as inspiration for it?
Like it's very strange to me to
I
kind of
don't.
like when like it wasn't like there was like killing people wasn't part of like people perceive Marx as the way that like they perceive Mein Kampf or something. I don't think that they're really the same thing.
Well, in what way do you mean? I mean, people certainly attribute every aspect of the Holocaust, no matter how mundane and no matter how tenuously factual, to directly to Adolf Hitler. They're always saying Hitler killed 6 million Jews. I'm pretty sure he never killed a single Jew personally, and yet they lay it at his feet.
Okay, but who did Marx advocate to kill?
He advocated for the revolution of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. Was the extermination of the kulaks not in line with what Marx was envisioning?
I'd say that number one, there's a significant time gap between Marx's critiques of capitalism and vanguard communism that came, during the Russian Revolution. I just don't. I would say that Lenin or even perhaps Stalin is probably more apropos a comparison to Hitler in the world of communism. I don't support any of those people. I don't support Lenin, Stalin, Mao, any of those guys. But I just don't. I think that Marx is just too early. I think he's too theoretical to like hang like this deep politicized stuff around his neck.
Well, hanging communism around the guy who invented it and laid the foundation that works for it, I don't think that's an unfair thing to do. I mean, all those people that you mentioned, sans Hitler, they all credited Marx a great deal, and they said that without his work, what they had done wouldn't have happened, right? Mao and Stalin disagreed fundamentally on how communism should proceed, but they both agreed that it should proceed from the Marxist theory of history, from the labor theory of value, from the critiques of capitalism and their advocacy of the class struggle. That's all rooted foundationally in Marxism, isn't it?
I would say that if we're talking analogs, I would say that Nietzsche is to Hitler what Marx is to Stalin. Does that sound fair?
In what sense? Did Nietzsche invent anti-Semitism?
No. Meaning that the outlines of Hitler's general philosophy might have been sort of triangulated with Nietzsche as a thinker, but Marx was not a political activist. Marx was not a political activist. He was a theorist, about capitalism. He criticized capitalism, but he wasn't a political actor in any way.
Except for all the political works that he wrote that inspired people. Oh God, yeah, mute yourself up. I mean, if Marx didn't do nothing, if he has nothing to do with communism, then how come all communists typically describe themselves as some special snowflake variety of Marxism? I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I'm a Maoist, and I mean, even right now, I was just reading a people where 200 years later, the People's Republic of China, even with its capitalist system to a certain extent, is still crediting Marx for the success of its system.
Do you think that Marx is responsible for modern China?
In some way, absolutely. I don't think that you would have seen Mao Zedong go down the path that he did without Marxism. I think that in a way, Marx was the most influential man in the past few centuries in terms of what ended up happening because of his ideas. Absolutely. Was it a positive influence? I don't think so, but you can't deny that it was very influential.
Well, you realize that modern China, since like Tiananmen Square, has been like the brainchild of Ayn Rand's wettest dreams, right? Like they haven't been communist other than in name for a long, long time.
They still have a shit ton of forced collectivization, the totalitarian police state, and the advocacy of the proletariat. I mean, to deny that China is communist seems to be to deny that water is wet. I'm not saying that they don't have some form of markets, but so did Leninist Russia. That doesn't mean that they weren't out there saying that we're Marxists and we're communists, and the system that we are using is the system based on Marx, and that we are trying our best to fulfill Marxism.
So you think that your iPhone was made in communist China, communist gulag?
Just because they have a what do you call it, a control economy, doesn't mean that they don't have an economy.
Okay, but this is every anarcho-communist, including myself, criticism of Marxist Leninism and Maoism and Stalinism. It's basically state capitalism. So I'm not sure how communism can be held accountable for state capitalism when that's not even Marxist.
Wasn't Marx the one that advocated for the establishment of a dictatorship of the proletariat? I mean, isn't that what the Communist Chinese or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea government say? Is that we are the dictatorship of the proletariat?
It's what they say. It's not accurate, though. I mean, do the people have power in communist China?
Some people, sure. I mean,
do the proletariat have
power?
How
you try to distance Marx from that. That seems.
I heard someone needs a helicopter ride.
Pop, we're doing a thing.
I'm just saying that it's just really far back to start putting dead bodies on something as theoretical as that. Then I can like put the dead bodies in South and Central America on Ayn Rand and the Chicago Boys.
Charles
like, you know
Manson never killed anybody, but when he's in jail for murder because people killed in his name.
No, he organized the people that killed. He directly ordered those people to kill. He existed and was in part of a collective with those people. Do I get to blame?
Okay.
Do I get to blame all the dictatorships in Central and South America on Ayn Rand? Is she responsible for all those deaths? No, not currently.
Don't you blame capitalism for the oppression and the deaths of all those poor people? It's capitalism's fault, right?
I would blame Kissinger for South America. I would blame, Ronald Reagan for South America. I wouldn't necessarily blame Ayn Rand directly.
Would you blame Christianity for the Crusades?
I would blame the Pope of that era. I would not blame the Pope of today. I would not blame a Pope that predated the Crusades by 200 years. I would blame the people that were involved at that time.
Would you blame the guy that was saying, hey, we should go kill Muslims in defense of Christianity? I mean, this is what I'm getting at, is that you seem to be autistically splitting hairs with people who are out there openly claiming that this is what we're doing. We are doing this because of Marxism. We are doing this to establish perfect communism or the dictatorship of the proletariat. And you're like, no, don't listen to what they're saying. I know what they mean.
Well, is this the first time that a politician or a dictator has lied about what they're doing and why they're doing it? Of course, everybody's gonna. There's always the state line. Do we have to automatically, uncritically endorse the state line?
What? I don't. I'm sorry. This is completely out of left field. I appreciate you joining us. I'm glad that we've got this. I'm blown away by, because you say you're an anarcho-communist, right? So you are some form of communist. And yet you're trying to deny the link between Marx and communism, which seems so foundational.
No, I'm just saying that it's a big leap to point to a theoretical, anti-capitalist, and then put like bodies from Stalin and from the mid 20th century, the early 20th century on his front door. Everything he did was. People sort of think Marx did more prescribing than he really did. If you really look at his writing, it's not about prescription; it's about diagnosis of the problems with capitalism.
Would communism have existed without Marx?
Communism existed long before Marx. There are versions of communism that don't involve Marx. So again, the implementation of the philosophy is what's important to me. I would say that Maoism is a thing. I would say Stalinism is a thing. I would say Leninism is a thing, but I would say their connections to Marxism are complicated.
So you don't think that like the 1917 revolution just happened like it would? You're saying that the 1917 revolution would have happened with or without Marx, that what he did and the inspiration and the legacy that he has is meaningless despite all of the people contradicting you throughout the historical record on that?
I'm just saying hold the political actors responsible for their positions. Adolf Hitler didn't just write his philosophy. He was the political actor responsible for its implementation.
Well, you guys act like any situation where, like, okay, there's a right-wing government, bad things happen, therefore it's fascism, you're literally Hitler. it doesn't really seem to be fair for you guys to apply the same thing and say, wow, all of these communist governments with really high death tolls in the millions that all claim to have some sort of foundational connection with Marx, none of that is Marx's fault or any way related to it.
I'm not going to say it's completely unrelated, but I'm not going to lay it at his doorstep like he's personally responsible. I just don't think it's accurate.
Good evening, Mr. McNabb.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Glad you could join us tonight.
Who are we having a discussion with? Is that
Jesus Christ, is that Alex McNabb? Are you fucking kidding me, bro?
Well, if you couldn't tell by his mic, he's a commie. So,
Oh, I believe these two
I
gentlemen
think
know
that's
each
my
other.
old pal Bronxy with the anemic intellect.
you might be.
Oh
correct.
my! What was this? Like, was this set up in advance, or did Homeboy jump on?
Well, don't be so defensive, Bronxy. I was just enjoying myself, and some people sent me a message, and I was like, "Oh, my favorite person is having a debate, probably getting his ass kicked. Let me come along and see what's happening."
I don't think we were quite.
This was not a setup. This was not a setup in the same way that you didn't run away from our debate. I was just saying we were having a show tonight on Marxism, and we were putting out links to people. You were reached out to. He was reached out to. This was never a prescribed ambush or anything. And if you want to walk away with no shame, feel free.
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Absolutely.
I'm here.
All
I'm
right.
just double checking.
All right. Well, Alex, what are your thoughts on where we're at in this conversation? Can you ascribe any of the death tolls of the 20th century from communism to Marx? Is there a causal link there?
Oh, definitely not. We could not possibly make that kind of association, just like we couldn't make the same association with white people in colonialism or anything like that. It just wouldn't be fair.
I was talking about political actors, not philosophers. Political actors. That's the only distinction I'm saying. You want to stick this on Lenin? Fine. Stalin? Fine. Mao? Fine. Those were people who ordered military and paramilitary forces to kill civilians. Someone who never met any of these people in his whole life and critiqued capitalism in sort of an abstract sense. It's not like there is a Marxist extermination program in any of Marx's writing.
Okay, so it's 2018 and you're still following Marx. Is that what I'm kind of understanding here?
I mean, I'm
Do you think that's
I'm an
valid?
I'm an anarcho-communist, dude. I don't really follow Marx. He had a big falling out with my prophet Mikhail
Hold on.
Bakunin.
Communist, like Proud Hunt, like what exactly? Which brand are you doing? Like Young Hegelian? Like what's going on here, bro? Because I kind of think they don't understand the intellectual basis behind all of this, or the origin point of Marx, or how he came to his views. So
Kropotkin
Please.
or Proudhon would be a more significant political prophet for me than the other mentions that we've had here.
okay. And you think that's valid? You think their criticisms are valid in this day and time?
I mean, again, we're not. It's not going to be an agricultural workers' revolution, but there are general principles. I'm sure you find some
Like
kind of
what?
general value in Mein Kampf that you're still using today, right?
No, actually not. But please enlighten me. Which principles do you think have value? Like what today out of that school of thought do you think bears fruit?
Well, look, when we're talking about personal property, when we're talking about private property, when we're talking about the commons, those things are still relevant today in the face of massive corporate privatization schemes. These things, who owns what and to what end, in the broad general sense that was discussed, is still relevant today. It doesn't matter whether it's who controls wheat or who controls, more modern resources.
Is property theft?
Forms of property are theft. Privatized property is theft, generally, especially things like
who
water
is
or.
stolen from, and exactly how can you have theft without the concept of property? If you do have the concept of property, you don't really have theft, now do you?
We start from a sense of common ownership of basic things like earth, air, water. You understand?
How does that work? The community owns it? Who's the community?
The community, again, it's an arbitrary qualifier, right? So there's certain things that human beings on Earth are agents of. There are basic. Do you not think that people as a species?
Property is not real. Ownership is basically theft, but the community owns stuff. How does this work? The abstract concept of the community owns things, or individuals from the community own things? I feel like you're kind of confused.
A toothbrush is personal property. The local water supply is not personal or private property, or it shouldn't be private.
Okay, so the community doesn't own it.
The community does not own your toothbrush. It has collective ownership of water and crops and things that are people depend on to live.
So the community does own something. This abstract entity takes possession of, like, how much? Like the entire planet? Like what parts? This seems very
of course.
vague.
Every person, again, you guys with this blood and soil stuff don't seem to understand these very basic concepts. You guys think that your skin color lets you own land, but you can't comprehend a very basic thing like people live near a body of water.
Please.
No, wait.
Water.
So why was the one chanting blood and soil? Because you were the one that was at Charlottesville. So I don't understand. Do you understand abstracts about indigenous people owning things or not?
Well, it's like you have never read Sterner, which I find really mind-boggling, considering that you're drawing from like the young Hegelians, from Marx, those types of authors, but you're not familiar with the philosophy. I mean, it's like I said on Twitter. I'm just getting the impression you're kind of dumb. I mean, it's just like earlier, we're discussing transgender individuals, and you sort of implied that if someone was attracted to a tranny, that meant that they were gay. And I'm like, well, that's kind of funny. That's sort of contradictory to the idea trans woman is actually female.
Okay. So number one, you're trolling because you don't believe a trans woman is female. But number two, I was making a comparison between
Well, he just dropped out of the call. Hopefully he'll be back in just a second. Good of you to join us, though. I got to say, a big fan. I like to listen to you on the show. You're always entertaining. I'm glad that, when the transition TRS has gone through with, like from the Ghoul and Bulbasaur era days, that you've stepped up and really been able to fill in your own. I think you're a really interesting guy, and I'm glad we have you on the show tonight.
I gotta say, though,
I appreciate being here. It's been fun to come on. I heard that one of my best friends was on here. I was like, well, I got to talk to this guy. I love Bronxy.
No,
my favorite.
Best counter.
Sorry, internet problems. Go ahead, man. What did I get cut off?
you dropped out.
I thought he got
Well,
shot.
let's just throw another little. Let's throw a little hand grenade in there for you too. Was Marx right in his critique of capitalism? Was the Marxist theory of history correct? I'll throw that to you, Bronx.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can live in this particular stage of capitalism in the Western world and not see a lot of value in terms of where Marx stood on. Again, you can condemn the tactics that people use later, and that can be applied to any philosophy. But to say that Marxist critiques weren't valid, even though I know that we don't live in as much of an industrialized first world as we once did, is perplexing to me, because it seems like the deep corruption of corporate capitalism, or some people call it globalism, has been laid bare for the left and the right.
Anyone want to respond to that?
I think there's some valid criticisms that Marx makes. Actually, I would agree. There's a few.
Well, supposedly the alt-right is supposed to be like a quasi-anti-capital. They're very capable of being anti-capitalist as long as they wrap capitalism with a Jewish nose on it,
Well, I don't think that anybody is in favor of an exploitative system that's not. I hate the idea that there should be some inherent value to fairness. But in a system that exploits workers, I don't think that whether you come from a Marxist background or not is something that anybody really supports. It's just the nature of how exploitative something is. A guy working in a factory for a wage that he agreed to, I don't see that as exploitative. But you have companies come together and they form monopolies, and they do things like flood the market of labor with immigrants, so that way wages are driven down. They do things like Jimmy Don's does, where they make people sign non-compete agreements to work for them, and then obviously that's going to make the labor market very disadvantageous to people. But I think we also have a different understanding of community, because you refer to community, you seem to be more of a globalist sense of community, whereas me and I don't want to speak for Alex here, but more of an idea of a white nationalist community. The idea of a country being an ethno-state, or at least having an ethnic heritage.
Well, I mean, capitalism should serve the community, shouldn't it?
I don't think that there are functional forms of capitalism. I think once people start owning things, it's a path to where we are now. And I don't want to start a system where we go back to. We got here because we started with privatizing property. I don't believe in that.
I don't think you can build a system if you don't have some form of privatized property. I've not seen historical examples of this that have gone particularly well.
I would kind of second that. What system works without any level of structure in it? And I'd say that being able to have something that is your own, and there's a set of rules that prevents others from transgressing upon you or your property. Well, how else would it work? Like, what other system has worked?
Within the system that I subscribe to, hierarchy is based on justification. You got to actually prove why you're in your position, and also most of anarcho-communism is horizontal authority, direct democracy, collective ownership, stuff like that. So if you think of capitalism in a highly vertical sense, then communism, and particularly anarcho-communism, is very horizontal.
Have you ever been on a committee?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, they typically don't function that well. There tends to be a lot of paralysis in decision making, and they tend to be outcompeted by groups that have hierarchies. The hierarchy is just more efficient, relatively speaking, than the communal system of decision making.
Isn't that
Okay, but see, that's a capitalist thing, though. Just because something's more efficient doesn't mean it's more ethical. You know what I mean?
Who cares about ethics? Are you an ethical realist, like a moral realist?
So the alt-right doesn't care about ethics and morals anymore?
Well, you're debating me, not the alt-right. And I find this very interesting because if you follow Marx doesn't actually make a moral argument. He's careful not to because of Max Stern.
Oh no, yeah, of course. He's again, most of what Marx, that's what makes cultural Marxism such a bizarre theory. Marx is not a culture warrior. Marx is like he's like a technocrat. Everything is economics.
I think you're missing the point. He doesn't make a moral argument because Max Stirner deconstructed that prior to the fulfillment of his line of thinking.
But there is no Marx cultural program as outlined by him. There is no cultural
we're not talking
program for Marxism.
We're not doing that. I think you miss what's going on here.
We're having a discussion about the implications of Marx, right?
Well, what you're saying is you have ethical objections to the outcomes of capitalism, and you can't really square that with Marx. That's just your personal beef.
Sure. But I mean,
that's basically it. Like, you just don't like the implications of capitalism for the individual, how it can turn out in ways that you morally disapprove of. But that's just you.
There seems to be a significant constituency on the left and right that have ethical problems with the outcomes of capitalism.
Yeah, depending on the system and what the outcome we're talking about is. But you're not going to find people on the right talking about the abolishment of, like, personal property. I mean, that's taking it a little too far.
Personal property or private property? Personal property is like your pair of shoes. Private property is you owning factories.
How do I get my personal pair of shoes?
In this existing order, you get them through manufacturing from a private factory.
I buy them and take ownership of them, right?
Correct. That's your personal property, and I totally approve of people having personal property.
How does that work in your system? How do I have personal property?
You have personal property because you have participated to the extent that you can. You give according to what you're capable, and you take according to what you need.
What if I don't? What if I decide that I don't want to give according to what I'm capable of? I just maybe slack off, or just maybe the factory needs us to work 40 hours, and I take a bunch of breaks, and maybe I contribute 20 hours.
Yeah, but see, you guys complain about this on show all the time. That tactical moral nihilism and talking about outliers.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you're just going to give stuff to people according to it seems very vague. I don't understand how you quantify that.
It's participatory, right? So to the extent to which you can participate, you contribute, and then you take from what you need. You need a toothbrush, you need pants, you need these basic necessities, and they're produced by the community.
What about people who absolutely don't do that? I mean, in this country, you have an entire underclass largely composed of a certain demographic who are capable of working, and yet many of them choose not to, or choose to work in a non-taxable, illegal sort of market. And meanwhile, you have people who really shouldn't be all that capable of doing it, and yet, you know, you get people who are like 70 working at McDonald's, while there's, you know, black guys in their prime, you know, living off the dole, so to speak. How does that challenge the idea of to each according to their need, from each according to their ability? I don't see a system like that functioning in a multiracial society.
See, again, you're coming back to this fact of like somehow that blacks are intrinsically lazy, and
Not
it's not a racial thing. If you go to Africa before the deep colonialism and capitalist corruption of those African countries, you had to work to live. And we're talking about a society where people have to work to live, and people prefer to work in order to survive.
No one is saying that all blacks are lazy. Like, first of all, let's get that straw man out of the way. What people might say is that in general, you may find other ethnic groups to be somewhat more productive. In general, not in absolute terms.
Hang on, Alex. He just popped out again. He's on his like phone or whatever.
Yeah, he's typically got low quality connections. Probably something about being a Marxist and not being able to afford like high speed internet.
So are we doing the Marxism talk today because it's his birthday or what?
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, faggot.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh boy.
I don't know. I just saw like the request and I was like, oh wait, it's my good buddy Proxy. It's going to be online. Sweet.
God.
I mean, what kind of friend would you be if you didn't show up?
Right. Exactly. And it's one of his
exactly
favorite celebrities' birthdays.
Yeah, it's like a birthday party here.
Bronx blocked me because I called him out on a Sinatra tweet. Made me sad.
Well, he literally blocked me to avoid that debate we were going to do back on Backyard Bloodsports. We had it all set up and everything else. Then he blocks me on Twitter, and he has this whole post someone has to show me of I'm not going to go on because he's a white nationalist, and he didn't tell me. And it's like, dude, I sent you the link to our stuff.
Oh, there he is. Speak of the devil.
Sorry.
There he is.
Hey, there you go.
Wi-Fi. So continue. You said that blacks, the alt-right or whatever, don't believe that blacks are intrinsically lazy. It's just that blacks don't want to work with other ethnic groups. Is that what it is? When they're amongst white people, they're lazy.
No, you missed the point. I don't know. Maybe you have trouble concentrating or something.
Can I just ask a question? When the hell did color come into this?
I threw it out there.
Oh, don't do that, Joachim. Color has nothing to do with these ideologies. It's all socioeconomic bullshit.
No, here's the thing, though. We live in the real world, and this is one of the issues that I keep running into, the idea that, you know, there should be an egalitarianism or there's some sort of abstract morality when you see in practice that there's a competitive nature of it all, right? If you have a system that works, your system will be more likely to be successful. I'd say that the Cold War was in a macro scale kind of that competition. But there's also a reason why it's difficult to find any sort of anarcho-communist society that has existed long enough to even make an impression, because it's a very uncompetitive ideology.
Correct.
No, it's certainly not a survivalist ideology.
Here's the thing. If you look at America, or you look at someplace like South Africa, the divisions between black and white were created by law. So if people have resentments today, it's because white and black were created as legal constructs. So there is a legacy to that. If you put 100 people together, black, white, Chinese, any other group, they're going to work together to survive. And it's not going to.
Did you just deny that black and white are things? Like, is race not real to you? Is there no difference between an Aboriginal and a Swedish person?
There's no science. There's no science. No legitimate scientist. There's no. We're not talking about alt hype or JF Garyepi or whatever political person you have misreading Google Scholar today. There's no legitimacy to race. That's like a Victorian idea. Ethnicity is very real. Ethnicity is genetic and real. If you want to observe that, then yeah, ethnicity is real. But race, no mainstream scientist today is going to acknowledge that there's such a thing as race, because you cannot define where white ends and black begins. You just cannot.
Dog breeds.
That's the continuum fallacy. That's called the continuum fallacy, and it's wrong. You
I've
should
heard
be-
alternative
this is so
hypotheses
basic
bring this
bitch,
up.
dude.
No, please,
Why do
that's
you
a
make
bunch
such
of
dumb
bullshit.
arguments?
So I can
Like,
get
do
the
you not
free
read enough?
American
I don't
money.
understand.
You listen. The laziest part of a debate is when someone pulls a fallacy argument out of their ass.
But
You can
it's
pull
true.
fallacies on every word out of my mouth. You can pull one of the 10,000 fallacies and say that I'm wrong, not on substance, because
Am I
but because
bald?
it's a fallacy.
I mean, look at me. Am I bald?
I'm
How many hairs do you have to lose to be bald? Do you know?
Yours
The
is
am-
a social construct.
Find that.
Sure, bald. Yeah, bald is different because people get
No, it's
fades,
not.
people get skin heads, people get
No, it's
the
not.
the,
How
ex, the
many
extent to
hairs
which
do I
somebody.
have to lose from being fully covered in hair to baldness before I become
Do we call
bald?
people? Do we call people with male pattern baldness who still have the horseshoe bald? Do they get called bald just because their pate doesn't have hair on it, but the rest of their hair, the rest of their head has hair?
It's kind of vague. Like it's very arbitrary where you draw that line. So
That's right. That's what
Baldness
human beings
and a
do. They
head full of
draw
hair, like-
arbitrary
So it seems like
lines. They
we
draw
have to do
arbitrary.
away with these concepts, right? Like I'm not actually bald.
Yeah, do away
have
with
full
it,
head
my
of
man.
hair.
Grow
So
a
you agree
beard.
with that?
You'll have hair on your head.
I have a full head of
Yeah,
hair. Right
yeah, you have some hair on your head. I'm sure you have tiny little particles of hair on your head at some
Okay, so
point.
I'm not bald.
Your whole head is not bald, right? You have to shave, so you're not bald. There's hair there. There are follicles under the skin, right?
Well, I mean, I have male pattern baldness to an extent, but right now, I mean, obviously, I'm not bald because to draw that line.
Is there hair on even 1 inch of scalp? Because I will say you have hair on your head and be accurate.
Right. So baldness isn't real.
But to be fair, you're literally splitting hairs.
It's
here.
defined arbitrarily. It's defined arbitrarily. Can you bring me someone who is not an alt-right political activist that
Yeah.
acknowledges that race exists,
Okay,
ethnicity
let me ask you a
exists?
question. Do dog breeds exist? Is there a difference between a Rottweiler?
Human
and
beings
a
are not
Maltese?
dogs. Human beings are not organized like dogs are. We're not genetically organized like dogs.
Are you
Human
like a
beings don't have
creationist?
subspecies.
He's
No,
kind of
absolutely
smart.
not.
Let's get another example. Hypertension. If the hypertension criteria is systolic of 140, is that valid or not?
Have they never modified any of those standards? Have they? Let's
so-
put it this way: Have they modified with new research how much salt is a high sodium or low sodium
We're
diet?
basically saying categories aren't real at this point.
And excuse me, they are arbitrary. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. It means that they're set arbitrarily. If you want a real qualifier that's endorsed by science and can actually be demonstrably proven, then you're thinking of ethnicity. I thought you people wanted an ethno-state.
Aren't all categories arbitrary to an extent?
Yeah, absolutely. But my
Okay.
point is that you get to a point of arbitrary where you're talking about Santa Claus, my man.
So what you're saying here is you just morally disapprove of the category of race, and therefore you're going to consider it to be invalid.
Is it a conspiracy theory? Is it a conspiracy theory that modern science, mainstream modern science, are they just being politically correct by not acknowledging? Do you need Garyepi because he's an outsider? I don't understand. Are his positions mainstream?
Which scientists are saying that race and these ethnic categories aren't real?
Jean-Francois, is he an outsider or not?
He's French,
What is
doesn't
that
count.
supposed to mean?
French people aren't real.
Are Jean-Francois'
Why are you
views
bringing
on
this up?
race because you're talking about race realism, and right now he is the #1 guy on that subject on this platform. Are his views mainstream amongst the scientific community? Is he peer reviewed?
Why would that matter? If they're mainstream or not, why does that matter?
Isn't science about the truth?
Yes, that's correct. So if
are you
again,
saying that if enough people agree, then it's real, but if they don't, it's not real? Are we doing that?
I have to admit, I'm really surprised to see an anarcho-communist making an appeal to authority. Throwing that
hold
out.
on. I'm talking about numbers. I'm talking about plurality, not authority. If 10,000 scientists say that race isn't real, it's not about the authority of scientists. It's about the number of people. It's about the number of people who are focused exclusively on this, giving you their conclusions of the data.
Nice appeal to majority. I mean, this
Yeah, so-
reminds me of
He dropped.
this reminds me of doctors agreeing that opioids are safe for the patient populations to be using, and then, oh my God, now we have an opiate crisis.
Wait,
Well,
if
it's
you
not
talk
about
about
that.
That's what appeal to majority.
Go ahead.
the doctor is in, and he's going to be out because I need to fulfill my, let's just call it my quota as being part of the proletariat for alcohol. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do have a wonderful evening.
Hey, thanks
Have
for
a good
stopping
night,
by the
Doc.
doc. Let's see you around. Have a good night.
Enjoy your
All right,
drunken night, bud.
So let me just throw this out there then, because you Bronx, you've been saying that there's no scientific consensus, and yet, James Watson, the guy who discovered DNA, is called a racist because he's stated that there is certainly a truth to race. Would you say that the guy who invented DNA is not some sort of expert on biology?
I'd say that if anybody subscribes to the kind of ideas that alternative hypothesis or Jean-Francois put forward on this platform, then they're a quack. Period. I don't give a fuck if they invented
The guy won a
the
Nobel
first
Prize.
rocket to go to the moon.
What's your credentials to criticize a guy with a Nobel
You're
Prize?
the one making an appeal to authority now, not me.
I'm an authoritarian.
You just got a point.
Yeah, but the thing is, Roxy's objection is moralistic in nature. He just doesn't like the outcomes of race as a category. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's biologically valid. It doesn't matter.
The numbers don't support
We
you.
were talking about tokay geckos, and I was like, well, this is a subspecies of a tokay gecko. He wouldn't give a fuck because it's just a gecko. He is concerned about political ramifications of race being a category. It has nothing to do with science, and he's being very disingenuous by not admitting this.
Has it been harmless in history, Alex?
Exactly.
Were the Aryan certificates harmless, or did that end up in people getting killed? Remember the Aryan certificates in Germany?
I feel like we're making progress now, because now you at least admit that it's not about science. Thank you, Bronxy, for being honest.